You're on the Spectrum, the Political Spectrum podcast with me, your host, Tobias Nash. And my guest today, he's a market socialist. That's his position on the political spectrum. He's also pretty neurodivergent on the other one, although I suppose so am I. It takes one to know one. Today we're talking about Mearsheimer and international relations, offensive realism. So Mearsheimer's theory, his claim that states always choose security over economic stability when push comes to shove. And critically assess this claim in the context of US-Chinese security competition, and I optimistically propose the idea that this can provide a way out of the strictures of neoliberal economic orthodoxy when we have to start taking into account security competition and reinvesting in our industrial and military capacity. And we talk about the idea of forming a Southern Indo-Pacific coalition of the states in the region, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and these countries working more closely together to form a counterweight for the purpose of collective security against Chinese influence in the region, but also a buffer zone between Chinese and American influence in the region. We also discussed the dangers of revolutionary thinking, the revolutionary mindset as this utopian ideal that just wants to wipe the slate clean instead of actually reforming the system that we live in, how it obviates the need for reform. We also discuss the dangers of the revolutionary moment, how the power vacuum created when you conduct a successful revolution almost always leads to the most authoritarian elements in a society taking control. We also discussed the Middle East, Israel and Iran, Israel as a forward operating base for US interests and a proxy for the US need to suppress Iran and stop it from becoming a regional hegemon and therefore a rival to the US. And we discuss the history of anti-Semitism and the Jewish people in the Gentile world and the diaspora, and the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and the way that Zionism itself is a fundamentally anti-Semitic proposition, such that anti-Semitism around the world simply helps the Zionist cause. So I hope you find something interesting in here, that it gives you something to think about, and that you get back to us with your thoughts. Really appreciate you listening. Check it out. Thanks. So one thing that Mearsheimer says, right, is that nation states never choose economic incentives over security when pushed.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Yeah. And then he says that's why sanctions never work against somebody like Russia and shit, because Russia's always scared that like NATO's going to fucking that like even though NATO is probably just like, you know, innocent.
I think there's plenty of examples of where he's wrong.
What are some good counterexamples to it?
Well, one good counterexample is happening right now, and that's between China and Russia.
Right.
They have conflicting claims and pretty large conflicting claims over territory.
Yeah.
And yet they have chosen basically to work together economically for a rather long time.
Yeah.
And eschewed security interests that, you know, are very important to both of them.
Yeah.
And those are going to have to be addressed.
Yeah.
But
they're kicking the can down the road.
And I mean, again, China and India.
Yeah.
Again, massive border conflicts between China and India.
Yeah.
And in general, in terms of foreign policy, they're not very well aligned with each other. They are massively competing, economic powers at this point, because the West is trying to invest as much as it can in India to build up like a manufacturing hub in India as a competitor to China, right?
Yeah.
And yet, India is part of BRICS. Because it recognises that there is effectively a stranglehold on the world economy by the United States and by the West, more generally. And so there's economic reasons there to be in league with China in BRICS that eschews security goals. So I think there's plenty of examples, and that's two right there.
Those two, yeah. So I think with India and China, like I don't know as much about that one, but I think with the Russia-China thing, like Mearsheimer was talking about those guys and saying they're not actually, they're not natural friends at all. They're actually have a lot of competing interests in the security space, but
there are also security interests that they obviously share because they have a common enemy.
That's right. That's the main thing.
Right.
In that instance, I think it's probably like partially explainable, at least by the common enemy in the United States.
But India and China?
But India and China, that one's interesting. I think that's, That's probably, I think with India and China, it's probably the fact that push hasn't really come to shove yet, I think, down the track. And I think that's kind of true.
I think it's getting pretty close to push coming to shove.
I think it's going to probably in the 2030s. And I think that's kind of true. I think that's like maybe 10 to 15 years behind the conflict between the US and China. So I think the US made a couple of real, like, according to Mearsheimer anyway, a couple of real stupid fucking tactical mistakes over the last sort of 15, 20 years, where one is, trading with China, and the other one is...
Well, I mean, at this point, you're going back 40 years, because that Chinese economic miracle, that was very heavily funded by the United States.
Yeah.
That was supported massively by the United States. It was the United States who sponsored China getting into the World Trade Organization.
I was just thinking about, like, when the whole sort of international recognition switched from Taiwan to the PRC, right? Like, that's a big thing. And then after that was when, I think with the neoliberal era anyway, the sort of second half of it is when there's been a lot more economic integration of China into the global US-led fucking... Yeah,
I mean, that was the whole impetus behind the normalization of relations with China, right? Is that, shit, we can use this place as a manufacturing hub because fuck all labour costs, so all of our producers can go there, and then our countries, or at least the rich in our countries, can get really, really rich. Yeah. And we can all have a fucking great time. Yeah. And that has led to, unfortunately, and it should have been able to been seen coming, frankly. Well, he did. It led to some pretty serious security concerns, as it was always going to, because you've got two powers that have seriously large competing interests. Like, China has no incentive not to want to be a regional hegemon. Yeah. They've seen how well it worked for the United States, right?
Yeah. So I think...
So they're going to follow the same fucking plan.
So I think, according to Mearsheimer at least, he's probably partially right about that. Those are the two biggest technical errors. One is, that trading with China, and the other thing is pissing Russia off for no reason and pushing them into...
forcing Russia basically into the arms of China.
Yeah.
Which is not a position that Russia really would have wanted to be in. I can't imagine that Putin wanted to be in that position, particularly.
No. So I think it's kind of the same. I think that the sort of economic cooperation between India and China is probably a similar version to the thing between the US and China, but like the timeline is back like maybe 10 or 15 years behind where things are with the US. Like things are definitely coming to a head between the US and China in the next like decade or whatever, or like now, that's where it's already started. And then I think probably in the future, India is going to want to try and become as much of a hegemon as it can. Is probably going to compete with China more, and probably try and build its own sort of economic sphere of influence and shit, sort of separate from. But I don't think it has the capacity at the moment. I don't think it has any ability really to compete.
There's an interesting thought though too. Is like, let's say that there was, because obviously there's security competition, and pretty intense security competition between the United States and China right now. Yeah. If that were to ramp up to an actual armed conflict, whatever that looked like, let's just say that for whatever reason, cooler heads prevailed in the context of a military conflict, and they both decided, look, we're not going to fire any nuclear weapons at each other because we both have a lot of those. Yeah. But the economies or military might of probably both countries are severely weakened in that time. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what kind of moves India would make. Yeah. Because that's a very heavily nationalist country. Yeah. It's definitely got expansionist aims. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. There really isn't.
It's just not a credible maritime power at all, and this is only
not at this point. No.
This is only real route to force projection. Is the maritime domain, because it's got the Indian Ocean to itself. Yes. Like, it just sort of projects right out into it. So, yeah, I think it's going to be like a threat down the track to this region, the Southern Indo-Pacific. I think it's going to want to try.
I think there's a good chance of that.
Yeah, and I think it's potentially, like, at this point, like a counterbalance to China as it grows. But it is. But in the medium term, like after that, it's... I don't think it's something that I would try and slot into a coalition if I was trying to build something.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about great powers, right? Or aspirant great powers, or aspiring rather. and it's the fact that they have an incentive to carve out more influence all the time. Yeah. And usually that is through carving out more physical territory, which is generally the most dangerous part of that.
That's kind of what I want to try and exploit, like down the track or in the next sort of. And I kind of see some of this cooperation stuff that I was anticipating happening anyway. Like I see closer military cooperation between Australia and Indonesia, and I think I'm seeing more regional integration between powers like Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, and a few other ones. Like I don't know about the Philippines yet or Vietnam, but I think there is kind of a shared interest there. And so I imagine like if we could get it to be just sort of a recognized state of affairs that these countries all together are sort of knit together into this kind of coherent block, and it extends all the way pretty much just about to Taiwan, then I feel like that could be a real like stabilizing influence, because it's almost like rather than I think that down the track, like that neither of them would admit it at this point, but I feel like it would actually be in the interests of the US and China if neither of them actually had control over the region, and the region itself was kind of sovereign and a buffer between the two of them. It's like they wouldn't have to compete, and we could like frame it more as like relieving them of duty of like policing and control of the area. Like they wouldn't accept that at the beginning.
Neither of them would accept that.
None of them. Neither of them.
At the same time, you could maybe force them into a position where they sort of have to focus more on each other's bullshit anyway, and it's just more advantageous to leave the Indo-Pacific alone.
Yeah, and what I imagine is like
it's probably a big if.
I feel like we could weasel our way into it.
Like, I think there's another barrier here, and that's sort of like on a humanitarian ground. Where in cooperation with Indonesia is concerned. Is because like if we're looking at forming like let's say we're seriously looking at exactly. This is if we were looking at seriously forming a military bloc with a bunch of nations, we probably don't want one of them to be committing a genocide.
The way I think about
and
that.
they are doing that in West Papua, so that would have to be ironed out before we could even do that without losing a massive amount of political credibility, like internationally.
What I was thinking, right, is that we work with PNG and help stabilize things there, and also. So a lot of people, like Hugh White was saying this, that people want to say, we don't have to worry about China because we've got this archipelago as a fucking buffer. And he was saying if we do want to rely on them, we have to kind of bring some weight to the table, so we actually have to still increase our defense spending and provide something that can help them. And so what he was saying is like shit like the Collins-class submarines, surface patrol vessels, and long-range marine patrol like aircraft could really help. And so the way I think about it is like we could help stabilize the archipelago of all those little fucking inlets and straits and all these like potential little separatist movements and stuff. If we're just like helping patrol and stabilize the region, what we could do is we could be like a credible security partner for Indonesia, actually help stabilize some of these issues for them, and we could do it in a more humanitarian and less genocidal way. And so also if we were working with Indonesia, what we can do is be like, instead of saying you guys are shit and this is unacceptable, we can be like, we're providing like human rights education and training and like ethical responsibility training and like peacekeeping kind of shit in this region. And so it's like you don't have to spend your resources on maintaining peace and stability in the West Papua region if Australia and New Zealand or like a regional kind of coalition are going to come in and help, right? And then we could think of it as like rather than as like a moral judgment, be like, as part of the economic and industrial development that we're facilitating, one of the things that because a big thing that I think we need to do is a lot of like investment in regional manufacturing, not necessarily building up manufacturing in New Zealand and Australia internally, because I feel like we don't necessarily have the scale for it, like more of it than we have now, but I think probably nearshore regional manufacturing in Indonesia and Malaysia. And as part of the economic investment and development and industrial development there, another thing that we could do is also like call it human rights development education, like trying to bring things up to like an OECD sort of level standard in a few different domains.
I think that's fine for like a justification for going in with Indonesia into like some kind of military bloc, right, or alliance. The thing that I sort of balk at though is that you're ultimately still going to need to answer the question of what actually happens with West Papua, because these are people that fervently want independence. Like they are hell-bent on independence, and can you blame them? The thing is like there's two opposing positions where West Papua wants independence. The people, obviously, the Indonesian government are not even fucking close.
Yeah, they'll never accept it anytime soon.
So then there's the question of what do you do? Do you help Indonesia enforce some sort of like security situation where basically West Papuans are prevented from protesting for independence or fomenting nationalist fervour, which I think is pretty questionable in and of itself. Or do you go, look, actually, you have to grant West Papua its independence, and then you can jump in with us.
There's no way
maybe that's not really worth it for Indonesia. Or you could maybe try a middle road of
like federalization.
Or some shit like making it an autonomous region, right? With its own sort of provincial government and all that sort of shit, and quite a lot of leeway in terms of how it runs its own affairs.
If you give it a little.
But again, I can't imagine that being palatable to either.
Okay, I can't see like any real.
It's a hard situation.
I feel like I don't know. Like to me, I would try and advocate for, like credibly advocate for some kind of middle road, some kind of like negotiated fucking compromise. Try and also work with PNG as much as possible and improve economic development there. And also work with the people of West Papua, not to promote insurrection, right? But try and improve the human rights situation, try and improve the level of economic development and the sort of standard of living for the people in the region, so that it becomes less of a issue about autonomy and shit. Because at the moment, like all of the fucking best jobs, all of the high status positions, all of the benefits go to like the Indonesian.
What you could do, and this would be a long-term solution, right? Is you could propose an economic union, sort of like the Eurozone, like a Indo-Pacific union. Right. So maybe even a federation. Which is basically that is what the EU is now. It's a federation, effectively. So, well, it's a loose federation, but it's a federation. So I mean that's a possible path to solving that issue, because then you bring West Papua into that federation, right?
And if we have that as like a long-term goal and it's like acknowledged by both, and we try and sort of have a carrot for everybody involved as much as possible, and also we look at our mutual fucking security concerns about like the
because we don't need a stick, because there's already the stick.
The stick is China and the US.
The stick is China and the US. Exactly.
They're both pushing against us. So if that helps us integrate and shit and get over some of these not petty differences, significant fucking issues, then I think that could potentially be viable. And so, I don't see it as like a huge fucking hurdle to overcome. Like, I mean, that one is like the West Papua, but I mean just economically, in terms of like the amount of...
Economically, I don't think it is. In terms of economic cooperation, I think there's already a lot of incentive for everyone involved. And also like security stuff. So another thing is that the US have this fucking foreign policy goal in the Indo-Pacific of trying to promote more... like they're trying to get their security partners to increase defense spending, and they're trying to get their security partners to manufacture their own weapons, or to manufacture US designed weapons and shit, so that they don't have to like send everything there. So they're trying to increase that industrial capacity and that military capacity anyway. And so I see that plus the increasing regional integration as these things that can sort of support the emergence of this coalition, or this kind of this security industrial bloc. And that's like the direction that I want to push in anyway, along with increased. It's just like an anti-neoliberal thing. And so, Mearsheimer, he says that people never choose fucking economic shit, financial shit over security shit, and there are exceptions, but you can have both.
And I think
it's just a matter of like, how do you get both?
I think you need both, and I think that the sweetener for me, or the sort of silver lining to the cloud of the increasing security competition, is that changing situation and the decrease in the neoliberal international order, the US-led, the sort of US hegemony is that despite the dangers of the increased sort of security competition, or actually because of the dangers, that is the only incentive that's strong enough to make people reject neoliberal policy. and the possibility of fucking massive growth and line go up in profits and shit is like, holy fuck, the Chinese are doing live fire drills in the Tasman.
Yeah.
It's like, shit's just getting real. We need to actually invest in infrastructure and industry so that we have credible fucking, you know, economic and military heft, and that we can't just be pushed around by other cunts. And so I think, also my hope is that that's the kind of thing, the need to push forward is the kind of thing that can unite the internal polity in a lot of these countries and get past some of the fucking bickering and the identity politics and the whole left-right kind of bullshit. Like, because if we don't work together, we're kind of fucked. And
yeah,
so this other thing, I've got my own like kind of my like new horseshoe theory. Like, I think horseshoe theory is bullshit, but I've got this opposite one where it's like almost like not the far right, but like the alt-right and the alt-left or some shit actually have more in common than we think. If we sort of try and move past some of the identity politics aspects of it.
Once you take the identity politics shit out of it,
yeah,
I think it's always surprising to find how much of the portion of the let's say the problems,
yeah,
how much of those that are identified by the quote unquote left and the right are the same things, right?
And they have a different prescription.
It's all the same problems. A different prescription for how that was caused.
Yeah, different blame.
If it's on the right, it's all the immigrants coming in and changing of our culture and all this other shit.
Yeah.
And downward pressure on wages through migration, which on that part I would say they're right about. Just on that point there.
I just think that's like a symptom rather than the cause, but yeah, like the.
It's
like a strategic thing.
That is a symptom. I would say that migration, like
I think it's used by
I would say
capital.
Overzealous migration, particularly of like low skilled entry level workers. A symptom of that is going to be downward pressure on wages. I think that's pretty much done on purpose with RSE workers and shit like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, obviously like the argument there is that's what keeps our orchards and our vegetable farms and all that shit competitive, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we need to do that to keep it competitive, is it worth even doing?
Maybe we could have subsidies and tariffs and shit instead, but that's not allowed. You know, the neoliberal paradigm.
Yeah, no, we can't have that. So we have to have, massive amounts of immigration of low-skilled workers, largely from the Pacific Islands at this point.
The classic example of overlap between the right and left that I think of is the ANCAP and the socialist both hating big corporations, but the ANCAP just saying, oh, but that's crony capitalism, it's not capitalism. And my first instinct to
they only get like that because the government has intervened, right?
And so my first response is to be like, shut up, you're missing the point, that's just how capitalism works, the state is always a tool of capital. But it's like, actually, fuck that argument, who gives a shit? You can just like totally concede the point, but yeah, that's right, fuck it. Like, we don't like that saying, because one guy said to me one time, I don't even have to go like Keynesian to combat like this bullshit, because even you can just like quote Adam Smith, like his conception of in the Wealth of Nations of the functioning of the free market was that wages would be high and profits would be low and firms would be relatively small, because you would need a social safety net outside the market to make sure that participation in the market was truly voluntary. Yeah. So it's not even fucking Keynes, right? It's like basic actual classical liberalism is like, we should probably have a fucking welfare state. It's like so it's not even like, it's not even that ambitious a claim, and so I see room for potentially like reunification.
The problem is that the ANCAPs don't go off the
Adam Smith, they're on like fucking Rothbard.
No, it's Rothbard and von Mises and Hayek.
Yeah, I feel like ANCAPs don't really matter
because again, like they will point to things like, and they're right on this, that Adam Smith erroneously believed in a labour theory of value.
Right.
And I mean that is an erroneous theory of value, frankly.
That's Marx's theory of value as well, right?
Different. They had a rather different labour theory of value, but it boiled down to the same conclusion, really.
What about
that labour was the defining factor behind one.
Kropotkin, what was his like? Was he a labour theory of value guy? Or I think he had a criticism of it.
Sorry, Keynes.
No, Kropotkin.
I don't believe
I feel like he was critical of it.
A labour theory of value guy. I'm trying to think now.
I I feel like he criticised it, but maybe Marx also did.
I feel like he also did, but I'm not too shit hot on that.
But yeah, ANCAPs, like they won't quote Adam Smith, but so I'm not too concerned about ANCAPs. I just sort of use them as an example.
Certainly Keynes criticised the latest theory of value. He was a marginal utility guy.
Oh yeah, I imagine like ANCAPs, like I just sort of quote them as an example because they're like an example of the extreme sort of right, sort of capitalist kind of anti-statist.
It's like what you think of as like on the economic sphere, right?
Yeah. I think of like even...
It's the opposite to the commies, right?
Yeah, so I think of like even the ANCAP and the socialist can actually find some common ground there. That's like an interesting point to me about this kind of this different version of
when we say
theory.
Socialist there, are we meaning like the Marxist-Leninist type?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying like anti-capitalist, like anti-big corporation, just naive, baby socialist, whatever, It doesn't matter what strain. Because that's another thing that I'm concerned about is a circular firing squad of the left and all the fucking leftists infighting. It's like, no, Maoist, no, fucking Trotsky.
That is the thing, is like the right seem to have this thing where like they can all pretty much unite behind like one ideology most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Not always, but most of the time. The left are always fractured.
And we're way more concerned about being correct than being effective than winning elections and shit.
It's a big fucking circle jerk. Like everyone's like, oh, look at how left wing and how smart I am.
Yeah. If you read
how good my solutions to problems are.
Yeah, if you read theory hard enough, the revolution is going to fucking happen. And it's like I got this fucking distrust for revolutionary thinking anyway, because I feel like it just takes the wind out of your sails whenever you think about like actual reform, the system that we have. It's like, oh no, we had to wipe the slate clean and whole start. I mean, there's no room for...
The concern that I have about revolutionary fervour is that it always seems to be the case, whenever you have a revolution almost anywhere, is that the people who are organising it and the people that see it happen are always the most authoritarian, the most power hungry, and they're the ones who power consolidates around after the revolution.
Even if they're not the ones who organise it and start it, they're the ones who like take over. Like even the Iranian Revolution, that was actually started by like pro-democracy, like fucking a lot of socialist, and then it became a theocracy.
It was started by people who largely were incredibly upset at the fact that the Shah of Iran was getting more and more authoritarian.
So it doesn't matter like what your impetus is for your revolution. It's just that once you successfully conduct one, it creates a power vacuum, and so whoever organises first, whoever has the most authoritarian fucking bent, is the one who's going to seize control.
And whoever has the most arms, and in that particular revolution, it was the Islamists who had the most arms.
Yeah.
They were the ones arming the communists. Yeah. And then they turned on the communists as soon as they got rid of the Shah.
Yeah.
There was actually one thing I was thinking about touching on.
Yeah.
There's this concept that has come along a lot from people who I would consider on the alt-right, far right. And this is term, I've had like a lot of like pushback. Just instinctually, I push back against this for a long time, and that's the term Islamofascism. Yeah. And Then I look at the way that countries like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE and Qatar, operate. Yeah. Right? And I'm sitting there like, hang on. These are countries which, in terms of like the businesses that run out of the countries, right? They might not be state-owned. Yeah. Like they're not like full-on. It's not like a full-on corporatist arrangement, but they are owned by the people and the families of the people who run the state apparatus. Yeah, like Aaron largely. I think there perhaps, and also, I mean, when it comes to like expansion of influence, right? There is at the very least, not in all in Muslim countries, but particularly when it comes to Muslim countries that are run by like the House of Saud, because that's a Wahhabi outfit, so they're pretty extreme. Yeah. And I would say the UAE as well. There is a lot of, I think, impetus behind a push for an eventual caliphate. And that to me does appear to be rather a fascist enterprise.
It's an Arab nationalist, Islamic nationalist fucking thing. It's Islamism.
Yeah, it's an Islamic nationalist rather than an Arab nationalist thing, because the Arab nationalist movement was rather I would argue somewhat more benign, a little more inclined towards liberalism.
The way I think about it, right, with that sort of security situation and the Wahhabist sort of House of Saud alliance, is like the House of Saud are not Wahhabists themselves. They don't really give a fuck about that shit. They're not devout at all. They're like shitty Muslims.
Yeah, they're pretty much just oligarchs, right?
But they're fucking...
They don't give a fuck.
They're so scared. They're scared of Iran. Yeah. And they're scared of, like, you know, the Islamic fucking theocracy and the legitimacy of Iran in the Muslim world as the sort of center of, like, Islamic culture and shit. And so they need... Because the population are so fervent, they need the support of the Wahhabist fucking, like, you know... Islamic movement to be able to maintain their control and as like a counterweight to Iranian influence, because like Saudi Arabia, like militarily, it can't fuck with Iran at all, right? Like that's what it needs. Can't. It needs, like, Iran's like a natural country. It's like a fortress and shit, and it's also got like the ability to shut the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, it does have the ability to shut the Strait.
It's like a massively powerful fucking actor in the region. It's just going to isolate it.
It's the second most powerful actor in the region behind Israel.
Yeah, and Israel probably... I don't know how much of Israel's might is just dependent on US support.
80 to 90% of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, if that was ever cut off, then Iran would be, very quickly, the strongest military actor in the region.
Yeah. Like, the interesting thing there is, like, I saw this debate between Destiny and a bunch of other cunts, and Nick Fuentes.
Fucking Destiny.
And Destiny was, like, maintaining that, the US...
Yeah.
The US was like its support for Israel was beneficial to the US because the US uses Israel as an outpost in the Middle East and it's like a staging post. And Fuentes like pushed back and he was like, "What do we stage from Israel? What bases do we have in Israel? What have we launched from Israel?" Which I thought was like, yeah, he fucked up Destiny. Like he shut him down entirely with that line of questioning because Destiny doesn't know shit and couldn't answer the questions.
But and there is no answer. There's quite a lot that's been launched from Israel. I mean, look at the relatively recent attacks on Iran. Now, were they at Israel's behest? Yes.
Yeah. But
did
still,
they also arguably serve American strategic interests?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, America can't let Iran be a regional hegemon.
No, absolutely can't.
Yeah, and Israel is its counterweight too.
Yes.
And so it doesn't matter
There's no doubt about that. It also can't let Saudi Arabia become a regional hegemon either, really.
It's got like, its bases in Saudi Arabia, and then Nick was like, "Oh, well, we got bases in the fucking UAE and in Saudi Arabia, all over the peninsula. Why do we need fucking Israel?" It's like, I think it's actually better for the US that they don't have bases in Israel, and that it's technically Israeli people and Israeli forces doing that shit themselves.
They have bases in the UAE, like you said. They have bases in Saudi Arabia. They have bases in Lebanon. They have bases in Jordan.
Yeah.
Like every other country that surrounds Israel, as other than Syria at this point, and Iran, and I think now Iraq, they have bases.
Yeah. So it's like, I think it's like the reason why I think it's beneficial for them to not have bases in Israel is like Israel's the only country that's actually willing to conduct military operations against Iranian interests themselves.
Yes,
with US backing.
They're the only ones who are really willing to directly go at Iran.
Because there's no political fucking like legitimacy or mandate for American boots on the ground dying right there, like for these interests. So it's actually I always think about the US and Israeli security establishment. Right, this is my like sort of answer to anti-Semitism and shit. It's not actually the tail wagging the dog, Israel controlling the US interests. It's actually like the deep state connection between both the neoconservative movement, which is furthering US military interests and imperialist interests through Israel, and it uses the Israeli people as a fucking human shield against like the like Islamic nationalist movement in the region. So it's like the Israeli people, as much as they actually fucking support the government and shit, like Netanyahu, I think, is just an oppressor of the, and he kills his own fucking people. He backed Hamas, right? He fucking...
Yeah, I mean, they funded Hamas for over a decade.
Yeah, because
he went to a Likud party conference and argued to his own party members why they needed to keep funding Hamas, because that was part of their strategy to alienate the Palestinian Authority and they had no one to negotiate.
And so have no credible fucking negotiating partner and no credible sort of possibility of a Palestinian state.
So, I mean, that automatically should say to you that he is not interested in the long-term security interests of his own country.
And the Israeli experiment does not keep the Jewish people safe. They don't have a safe homeland. They're much more endangered being there. And it's like, It's like a psyop. It's like a fucking Stockholm syndrome fucking thing. And also, you got the Hannibal Directive, right, as well?
Right, yeah.
Don't let them get taken.
That's one that boggles my mind still, right? Because the entire idea behind the Hannibal Directive in Lebanon, right, when they first, what was it, 1980s?
Yeah.
When they invaded Lebanon, they first did that so that when Hezbollah tried to, or they kidnapped a soldier, particularly an officer, there was a risk that they had intelligence that Hezbollah could use, so they would kill them to prevent intelligence getting into the, critical intelligence getting into the hands of Hezbollah. Yeah. Controversial policy in and of itself, but I can see the utility behind it. It's pretty fucked up, but right. Like I'm not going to outright argue that there's no value to it. But someone needs to explain to me where the fuck the value is in killing 18 and 19-year-olds and 20-somethings that were going to a fucking concert in the desert and were getting kidnapped. Yeah. Shooting them with helicopter gunships. Yeah. Like, hang on. What fucking intelligence do they have, bro?
Yeah. It's not about intelligence. It's about just. It's just that they can't
the logic in killing them?
Just don't want any hostages. It's like they don't want any leverage. So it's like
that seems to be it. It's fucking, a very cynical calculation if that's the case.
It's so evil, yeah. And so it's like, okay, they funded Hamas. They fucking kill their own people. They kill their own personnel, And also the majority of Zionists are Christian and fucking anti-Semite.
Yeah,
right.
It's mostly evangelical Christian.
Historically, even before the establishment of the State of Israel, there was a deep conflict within the world, the Jewish world, between the diaspora and Zionism, as was the center of gravity.
Even between Zionists, there was massive conflict between where they were going to go, when they were going to go, how they were going to build this state. There were Zionists. There was a very, very strong Zionist movement. I can't remember the rabbi's name. But there was a rabbi that was like part of the Zionist movement. He was very influential, like alongside Chaim Weizmann and Theodor Herzl. He's the only one out of the three of them that I can't remember his name. Yeah. But his whole idea was, they were going to go, if they went to Palestine, they were going to go, instead of creating like a state called Israel, they were going to just help build up Palestine. Yeah. And they were going to live in amongst with the Palestinian, the Arabs, as they called them, that didn't have the term, Palestinian. Yeah. Like the one thing that pro-Israelis like they harp on quite a lot about is that the term Palestinian was only really invented in the 1960s. Yeah. And it's like it's not really the case. It was more like the 1930s and 40s. But I mean, okay, sure. Like they didn't have a word for Palestinian then, right? Yeah. They didn't have like a particular term for the Arab population of the region, but so pro-Israelis will use that to like discredit the idea that Palestinians are like a national identity, but it's like realistically, like these same Arab people had been living there for fucking thousands of years.
And they're also Jews.
They are Jews. They're Jews who converted to Islam after the fucking Saracens invaded, right? Yeah,
they converted to Christianity. And then
they converted to Christianity and then they converted to Islam.
And it's like you can find so much like evidence of Jewish heritage. Like they're the closest genetic link even to Ashkenazi Jews. Like even the ones that people say are white, and people say, oh, those are just colonizers. Those are European.
They're a closer link to the ancient Hebrew population than the Ashkenazi Jews are.
Well, they're a closer link to the
Ashkenazi Jews. Yeah.
Even to the Ashkenazi Jews, they're a closer link to them than other Europeans are, or than they are to other Arabs and shit. So it's like, and also you've got like ancient like Hebrew and Israelite fucking agricultural practices that are in the Bible, which are common to the Palestinian.
There are cultural practices that are practiced all around Palestinian towns and villages now. Yeah. That are Jewish cultural practices.
Lighting candles on Friday and shit.
That's exactly what I was thinking actually. Just lighting candles on Friday.
There's also like a lot of the old like rural Palestinian families used to have or still have like Jewish surnames or surnames that acknowledge Jewish heritage and ancestry and shit. And so it's like, sure, there's some admixture and there's been Arabization and stuff, but that's pretty much the indigenous people of the land. So it's like, I think you could actually have a Jewish state there, technically a Jewish state that still is just a Palestinian state, because it's like, I feel like you could have a unitary state, because I think there's no credible path towards a two-state solution, and I don't think that Israel deserves to be a thing anyway. So
I think the only reason that there isn't a credible path towards a two-state solution is because we have massively funded Israel to the point where they are the penultimate power in the region, and they whatever they say goes.
The ultimate, yeah.
Almost, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the US is going to back them.
Yeah.
To the help. So if they're not willing to allow for a Palestinian state to exist, then a Palestinian state is just not going to exist.
My prediction and my hope here, this is similar to my whole sort of Southern Indo-Pacific coalition idea or sort of or fantasy or whatever, is that what you get in the end is like a de facto one-state solution that turns into like an expanded definition of Jewish identity that includes the Palestinians, but like the Palestinians won't accept that, the Israelis will not accept that. Definitely not right now anyway, but I feel like that's, like no side wants to fucking admit that, but that's just how it is. It's like those people.
That is the reality of the situation.
Underlying,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, effectively, the Palestinians are, they're Muslim Jews.
Yeah,
because ethnically
that's right.
They are Jewish.
Have you seen that movie? Princess Mononoke? The Studio Ghibli one, the anime.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
There's that headless.
Of course, I fucking seen it. I'm an anime nerd, bro. Come on.
The headless forest god, and they have to. I feel like the Palestinian people are like that. Like the head of the thing has been cut off, but its nature is still inherent. Like it's just walking along, like without seeing where it's going and shit. But it's like you can't remove the roots. They're too deep and shit. It's like
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
that's a good analogy.
I don't know. It's just like a thing that like intuitively fucking comes up in my mind when I think about it. But so I feel like, I don't know, some almost sense of hope for that. But the reason why I think about this kind of shit,
I feel like there's too much nationalist fervour on each side.
Yeah, but I think that's like often pushed by like territorial shit and militarist and also economic shit that's pressuring, and also international actors pushing and fucking around. Like the
there's
history.
Just a whole lot of hatred though as well that has been propagated largely by the fact that Israel has continued an occupation of Palestinian territory for 70 years.
As much as the Israelis hate the comparison to apartheid, that's actually the thing that gives me hope, is the reconciliation that's happened like after apartheid, even though South Africa has turned to shit, and
the white people turned to shit because Nelson Mandela sold out,
right? And also because
so it's a whole different thing.
Because there's still a huge amount of racial inequality and stuff. People say, "Oh, there's white genocide happening," but it's like the white South Africans still maintain like control most of the land and wealth.
The question is like, okay, if there is a white genocide happening, which I don't accept that there is. I accept that there are a lot of killings and burglaries done on white farms.
Yeah.
And
there's just a lot of crime
I think
everywhere.
That's largely a result of the continued economic deprivation.
Yeah.
Because the whole truth and reconciliation thing, and the end of apartheid was supposed to bring about a more
like equitable
equal society between
didn't pan out,
blacks
right?
and whites, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, so
all of the richest people are still white.
Yeah, and you still got
there are a few of them that are black as well. Like there's a small black elite now, but it's a small black elite.
You still got so you just got like massive crime rate anyway, and then also most of the wealth is in white hands, and also rural environments. There's like less policing and shit. It's further away from everywhere.
It's easy to see the argument.
Easy to get more.
And I've heard a lot of white South Africans make this argument.
Yes, I never listened to any white South African
apartheid, and I can almost see that. Like, in some ways, they were, but not because apartheid was a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. It was fucking horrible, but they had access to at least basic public services.
Yeah.
There was free healthcare for black people in South Africa under apartheid.
Yeah.
Do they have that now? No.
Yeah.
There's almost no public healthcare in South Africa for the black population.
Yeah, that's not because
there's almost no public healthcare in South Africa.
That's not because black self-rule is like poor or anything. It's just because the economic fucking imbalance still retains. It's freed up the white people to actually have more economic control and shit. Like they're not like having. What
happened is the big corporations came along. They said to Nelson Mandela, "We'll back your African National Congress movement if you promise that you won't make this economic reform, and this economic reform. So don't raise wages, don't implement social safety nets or public services." They actually, one of the things, and this boggles my mind so bad, but if I don't know if you read The Long Walk to Freedom?
No.
So one of the things that he says is that they asked him actually not to spend too much on the police force.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he did go and spend a whole fuckload of money on the police force, to be fair.
Yeah.
He did do that. So, I mean, that's probably a good thing in the context of it, right? I'm no big fan of the police.
No, but in this instance, perhaps.
Perhaps it was probably a good thing that he didn't listen to them on that. But he did listen to them on all the rest. Yeah. He didn't raise wages by a whole lot. He didn't do the massive land reforms and all that shit that he said he was going to do in the lead up to it, because he was masquerading as a communist. Whether or not he was an actual communist or not, I don't know. I don't believe he was. Yeah. But he was masquerading as a communist. Yeah. But yeah, they never built a social safety net. They never built public services. Yeah. In fact, they dismantled the existing public services. Yeah. There were public services under the apartheid regime. Yeah. Were they very good for the black population? Not really. Yeah. They had schools with but they were better than no public services.
Yeah. Yeah. Better than nothing. So yeah, so with the Israeli apartheid and the reason why I was thinking about that is kind of like, there's this conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, but it's like, no, Zionism is anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitism really helps Zionism because it makes the world unsafe for Jews. And there's also this convergence of interests between, international anti-Semitism and Zionism, because they both want the Jews out of Europe, right, and going to fucking Zion. And even now, now the new Europe is pretty much New York in the United States. It's like that's the new sort of homeland for the diaspora outside Israel. And it's like the rising anti-Semitism in the US is potentially, going to push more people towards Israel. Although, a lot of young Jewish people are fucking anti-Zionist now, are not supporting it at all. So I see this sort of...
It's funny to see how quickly public opinion among American Jews, particularly younger American Jews, is changing on the position of Palestine. Yeah.
Maybe that will actually change things.
With the apartheid thing, though, I sort of feel like we need a new word for what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank.
Different from apartheid.
Because honestly, apartheid was pretty bad, right? But even with the Bantustans, which were horrific, nothing like the deprivation that has been visited on Gaza was ever visited on any of the Bantustans. Yeah. Ever.
Probably the closest thing is actually what the British did to the
worst apartheid government looked like the fucking Teletubbies compared to the least hawkish Israeli government.
Probably what the Israeli fucking genocide in Gaza and shit is closest to in the South African history would be the original concentration camps from the British when they were suppressing the Boer.
Yeah, from the First Boer War. Because that was the Dutch that were getting locked up in those. I mean, Zulus and shit as well. And Shona, but largely it was the Dutch.
It's kind of interesting
how they were getting locked in those concentration camps.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the anti-British or the British imperial fucking effort has often. The European enemies of the British Empire, as rivals and stuff, have often worked to promote indigenous liberation and decolonization and shit, just to get at the British Imperial.
Well, I mean that's the whole thing, right? That's a pretty natural impulse, I would say.
Makes sense, right?
It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
The Germans did it a lot, right?
If you look at the First Boer War, the amount of power that the Zulu kingdom gained just out of that one war, right, from being supported so heavily by the Boer, only to be turned around on after the end of the Second Boer War. Yeah. When they actually went and fucking basically kicked the British out. Yeah. They turned around and did apartheid almost fucking instantly. But yeah, I mean that's been a common thing, whereas the white enemies, the European enemies of the British Empire, have bolstered indigenous movements,
and the British did it as well.
Have acted like the benefactors, indigenous
just cynically,
the indigenous movements and tribes and that are going to be benefactors of this,
and then they'll turn on them.
New, lovely, friendly, nice, benevolent white regime. Yeah, it's never going to be the case, bro.
The British did the same thing.
We ain't like that.
During the American Revolutionary period, right, where they subsidized and supported the Native American Indian. They said,
because the argument was that these guys who are arguing for independence against us, they are colonizing your land to make themselves stronger, so that they can fight back against us.
This is the
so
same.
if you help us, then they can't do that.
That's right.
And they can't colonize all your shit.
That's the same. This is the same dynamic that we were talking about earlier. Who was it we were talking about? Like, was it the Chinese or somebody, like supporting one fucking movement and then turning on them when they? I can't remember. I'll like play it back. I'll listen back.
I think we were talking about like economic cooperation between like China and Russia, and then China and India.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
While eschewing security goals.
There was some
particularly in China and India's case, because there are common goals when it comes to security between China and Russia.
There was one particular example of like some power supporting somebody to fucking remove some other influence and then turning on them and as the next stage.
Well, I mean, India's done that. They did that with East Pakistan.
Right.
Because that's Bangladesh, right?
Yeah.
So, they supported the Bangladeshi independence movement.
Yeah.
And then they went and almost immediately blockaded Bangladesh, almost as soon as it declared independence, and said, look, you're going to sign up to all these treaties with us, otherwise you're not going to have an economy.
Yeah.
Right? So now, basically, the economy of Bangladesh is run by India.
Yeah. It might have been
it's controlled by India.
It might have been the Indonesian thing or some shit. With West Papua turning... Second supported them and then turned on them or some shit.
I think...
Against the Dutch? Nah, it was some other... But it just happens all the time. Yeah, I can't even remember which specific example it was.
I mean, you could look at Cuba, for example. Cuban Revolution. The CIA supported the Cuban Revolution because they wanted Fulgencio Batista gone. Batista was not cooperating with Western interests anymore. Yeah. He had gotten too full of his,
I remember now.
His own shit.
It was the Iranian... Theocracy. It was the Iranian socialist.
The Iranian Revolution. That's actually what brought me to the topic of Islamofascism, because I was thinking about this whole thing where whenever there's a conflict between socialists and fascists, right? The capitalists always, the liberal capitalists always side with the fascists. Yeah. And I think you can quite accurately see the conflict between the groups that eventually won the Revolutionary War, right? And they had basically a small-scale civil war in Iran after the revolution. Yeah. That was Islamists versus socialists, but
still
I think you can largely see that Islamist side as a fascist faction. Yeah. Because they have a lot in common with fascist ideology.
So the way I think about it is like, you get that triangle in like workshops or whatever where they say, you can have, we'll do a job for you and you can pick any two out of good, quick and cheap. You can have a good, quick job, but it won't be cheap. You can have a
quick, cheap job,
but it won't be good.
Or you can have a good, cheap job, but it will be slow.
Yeah, that's right. And so I feel the same. So like I think of it as liberalism is democracy plus capitalism, and then fascism is capitalism without democracy, and then fucking socialism is like democracy without capitalism. It's like an oversimplification. I think
I'd be a little bit broader on that, in the sense that like capitalism or liberal capitalism, right? Yeah. Is capitalism with a pretense of democracy.
Yeah, sure. It's got a near democracy.
It's with a pretense of democracy.
Right.
I struggle to call that democracy.
So that's why the liberals always side with fascism.
Fascism is liberal capitalism without the
veneer.
Fascism is basically the same as state capitalism, but because it is a form of state capitalism. Yeah. Minus some of the inherent like democratic processes that usually come along with state capitalism. Not that obviously there's less democratic processes that come along with or less of a democratic process that comes along with state capitalism than sort of like market capitalism. Yeah. But fascism obviously just goes and removes that as well.
So that's why the liberals always side with fascism, because at least it doesn't threaten the accumulation of capital. Line go up. It's like, no, we can't.
Lines still go up.
Until it gets so bad in terms of human rights and stuff, they're like, oh no, we can't keep doing this. Let's put the veneer back and let's have some a little bit of welfare and some human rights.
But they'll never actually back the socialists or the fascists in conflict. No. The only time where the liberals have sided with the socialists.
Let me guess.
The socialists
Spain?
got invaded,
Oh.
and no, the liberals sided with the fascists.
Right, the liberals did, but what?
They sided with the fascists.
But you
Spain.
had
They sided with fucking. I was thinking Ferdinand Marcos, but that's the Philippines. What am I talking?
Franco.
Franco.
Yeah, I was just thinking that like in the Spanish Civil War, the one thing you got is you had like anarchists and you had like sort of democratic socialists who allied against the fucking Stalinists, but then they ended up working with the fascists as well, like or getting defeated by the fascists, Franco. So maybe that was, but no. What example were you talking about when socialists got invaded?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm talking about World War II, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, Russia and Germany were pretty much, they had a non-aggression pact going on. They were, you know, all good. And then Hitler fucked them over. And, like, otherwise, there is no way that Stalin would have even considered going anywhere near the United States and the UK and helping out there.
Yeah.
And the UK and the United States weren't going to invite Stalin in.
No.
He came to them.
Yeah.
And, like, that's always going to be the way. Like, if the liberals and the socialists team up, it's going to be the socialists always going to the liberals to get them to work against the fascists.
Yeah.
Whereas the liberals are always going to be more inclined, naturally, to work with the fascists against socialists.
Yeah.
Always. Because socialism is a bigger threat to line go up than fascism is. Because fascism isn't really a big threat to line go up, and in some cases, it lets line go up faster.
Yeah.
It's just that the liberals don't really like it because they have their ideas about like what they should be allowed to do in their private lives.
Right.
All of the rights that they should have, and fascism takes them away as well.
Yeah.
So they can't really abide that part of it, but they can abide that better or more easily than they can abide an actual threat to their economic system.
Yeah, fuck that.
Which socialism just by nature represents.
And if you think that's what fascism is. Right, is the whole point of it, the whole like conception of the fucking National Socialist Party, even before Hitler was sent in, was to, and it was really unsuccessful before they had Hitler, was to divert revolutionary sentiment away from socialism towards anti-Semitism and fucking, you know, like white nationalism and shit.
Well, that is exactly what have you. I'm trying to think of the actual. I think it's just called The Doctrine of Fascism. It's by Benito Mussolini.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read it, no.
He actually says...
Shit.
He says as much as that one of the ideas behind fascist ideology is to take the wind out of the sails of socialist revolutionary fervour.
Yeah, and Batar,
particularly because that is
Benito
such a... He sees that as such a threat to productive capacity.
You know, the fucking...
or in other words, line go up.
And the early Zionists, like the revisionist Zionists, right, Batar, they actually had like training camps in fascist Italy. They only stopped working with Mussolini when he got too close with Hitler. But then even then, there was the Haavara agreement between the Nazis and the Zionists to allow some export income for the Nazi regime because it was like internationally ostracized. And so by helping some wealthy Jews immigrate and take like furniture and shit or buy it, that technically counted as some export income for the Nazi regime, so it was like beneficial.
And it also achieved the goal of getting Jews out
That's
of Europe,
right. There's a convergence of interests, right? So it's like, I think my solution to the problem of anti-Semitism and shit is to try and push back against it with this idea that no, Zionism itself is actually fundamentally anti-Semitic. That
I would agree with that entirely. I've actually used that line before. It casts Jews in the role of like the scapegoat of the West.
Exactly, and I think they always kind of have been used that way. Like
I feel like that's the case. I mean, you look at how they were treated in Eastern Europe, right?
Yeah.
The industries that they were pretty much corralled into. Like people talk about how Jews were always moneylenders and bankers and shit, and it's why is that the case?
Yeah.
Because Christianity at the time. And these were all Christian theocracies, effectively.
That's right.
That's what they were, right? These Eastern European states, and European states in general. Right? Christians at the time saw those industries as fundamentally immoral. The concept of usury was still a huge thing in Christian doctrine.
So they banned that for Christendom and then condemned the Jews or consigned them to that role, like the untouchable.
That you have to be in this role, but because you're in this role, we don't trust you, we're going to keep persecuting you and saying that you're filthy, evil, fucking horrible people.
That's right. right.
that are manipulative and scheming.
As long as
because you're in this role that we don't like, even though we forced you into the role because we won't do it.
As long as there's been such a thing as the West or European identity, it's been defined by Christendom. And it's been defined by rejection of the Jews, who were kept in European territory as in the medieval period, the church referred to them as humiliated witnesses to Christ's ascendancy. And
bro, that's rough, eh?
And like fucking one of the English kings in like the 10th or 11th century during the Two Crusade period had the Jewish exchequer, like, so it was like a line of credit. And so instead of having like income tax or taxing the population, he allowed the Jews to lend money and interest and charge interest, and he taxed the Jews. And then they expelled the Jews in the 12th century. So it's like they cashed that in. They used, because the Jews have these tribal networks, they had these international connections to their family in the continent, and so they had these extensions that would like gain lines of credit and stuff, which were useful for the kings, useful for funding the Crusades, and going and fighting the Muslims. Again, it's like the whole way back. And then a lot of the modern a lot of the contemporary anti-Semitic tropes that we have about them being shifty and untrustworthy in business and all that kind of shit were actually, they come from the late medieval, early modern period in the Northern European, like Hanseatic League, the Protestant kind of areas, where you started to get an emergent fucking Protestant urban merchant class that would compete with the Jews in those same industries. And so all of a sudden there was this interest in like trying to push them out. They have to demonize them somehow. Yeah, that's right. And so that's like where a lot of those libels come from. And that's sort of the answer to this other question that I always had, is like the Jews were like less than 1% of the fucking European population. How were the whole Jewish quarters and towns to get pogromed and fucking burned down and fucking genocided? It's because the population was like 90-something% rural, right?
And they were corralled into these quarters.
Like,
they weren't welcome to live anywhere else.
No, I was just thinking like how were they even a significant enough fraction of the population to have a fucking quarter? It's like because the towns were small and a tiny fraction of the population overall, so the Jews could be a significant portion of them. So it's like the whole time they've been. And so then I think it's still true today. Like I think with people say, oh, how come the top big 5 media corporations all have Jewish executives and shit? I think that's still kind of like the court Jew phenomenon, where it's like conspicuous but subordinate roles, where it's like, it's not like, I don't think there's a conspiracy behind it. I don't think that it's like, oh, they've just been allowed to do this by like some shadowy elite or whatever. But I feel like it's maybe like path determined by that same kind of thing about historically they were corralled into certain industries and shit. But I still think it's like, it's at least convenient for the established Gentile power structure to have. It's not like they deliberately engineered this, but I think it's convenient for them to have the face of so many corporations and the head of so many corporations just happen to be Jewish.
I think that's largely true, but I also think that there is a considerable amount of lobbying that is done by organisations like AIPAC, like COFI, and by prominent, rich, like elite Jews that are very like heavily involved in the Zionist movement that ensure, because they have ties to these big corporations, particularly media outlets, and that they ensure that they get their people in there near the top so that they can have some influence on, particularly media outlets, because they can have some influence that way on what's said.
I think it's a Zionist thing rather than a Jewish thing.
I would agree. I think that's a Zionist thing.
And I think it's a convergence of interests between elite Gentiles.
I think that's a lot of the reason why you see Jews in these big prominent roles in these big companies, is because there are some interests at play there that it's convenient for the companies to have some little sort of like Jewish scapegoat. But it's also very convenient for the Zionist movement to have their people placed in the high echelons of these companies so that they can make sure that nothing is too unfriendly to Israel.
I think of the Zionist movement and of the neoconservative movement as this convergence of interest between elite Jews and elite Gentiles. And I think of it as a continuation of the historical phenomenon of like the court Jew in the medieval period, where you'd have these wealthy Jews who were elevated to conspicuous but subordinate positions by the theocracy, by the Gentile power structure, and and there were these networks of like patronage and stuff, and Jews were allowed to gain wealth because it was useful, but they were also periodically liquidated and just fucking murdered or expelled, and had like pogroms and stuff inflicted on them. And so
that was the thing. They were sort of like and I think this sort of is similar to how the Jews are used now, right? They were sort of used as either the scapegoat or the shield for when the population started to get angry at the rulers.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
So people would start getting angry, the aristocracy or perhaps the king, and then the aristocracy or the king would be able to turn around and go, well, look at who actually controls all of the flow of money, right? Yeah. Look at who controls what's lended to whom, how it's lended to whom.
Yeah. They just blame it on them, right?
They control the economy. They're the reason that you can't afford a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
They're the reason that your crops are failing.
Yeah. And I think it's convenient for these wealthy Jewish elites as well, because they're not the ones who end up getting liquidated mostly. It's going to be the Jewish population, the Jewish people. So
it is, because the wealthy elites usually are allowed to flee.
Yeah.
They've usually got the resources to get the fuck out.
So it's the Gentile and Jewish elites subjugating both their peoples, and then the Jewish people as a whole are the ones who bear the brunt of it and get murdered and fucking excommunicated and, well, not excommunicated, exiled, expelled, and just liquidated and fucking destroyed.
And that alone, that creates this and it's a long-standing thing now. It's created this psychology amongst the Jewish population or this pathology rather.
Yeah.
That she's we're always going to get attacked no matter where we go.
Yeah.
We're always going to get attacked.
And you can
everyone's after us.
And you can totally. I think
there's
a justifiable
truth to it.
It's a justifiable belief, right?
Yeah, I think it is a justifiable belief.
Yeah. So it's
unfortunately, the way that's taken a turn is towards ultranationalism.
Yeah, and so I think
that has not helped their cause.
So I think the Zionist project is the new version of that same age-old fucking thing of using them as a shield and using the Jewish people as a fucking shield, and the elites exploiting them. And I think imagine what fucking Theodore Herzl would make of this discussion. There's the Urgan or whatever they were called, and the Gang of Worship.
The Urgan.
And there was this other thing, not Bata, but this other fucking movement. There's Jewish assassins in the ancient period. But there was a modern equivalent of them, this terrorist movement or whatever, who named them. Oh, the Sicarii.
Okay.
So there was the Zealots, right, in the sort of Second Temple period. I
thought you might have been talking about the Leti, but yeah.
Yeah. So there was this other, the guys who called themselves the Sicarii. They called back to that ancient tradition, and the Sicarii, they at the time were said to have opened the gates of the temple or of Jerusalem or some shit to invaders, and also of murdering a whole bunch of Jews inside the city to try and help, because those Jews were collaborating with the Romans or some shit, because they wanted to protect the ultra nationalist Hasmonean or whatever the fucking the Herodian dynasty. So there was the Jewish kings Herod at the time who were established and they were kind of figureheads or whatever. And then Roman rule was actually requested at some point because the Herodian kings were so shit. I can't remember exactly what the timeline was or how the whole dynamic worked. But it's the external colonizer or whatever, the Roman kind of influence was a better option than the...
I think what you're talking about is when the kingdom of Samaria started to collapse.
Right.
And effectively Judea just had to either bail out Samaria initially, or just watch it fall into ruin because it had a shit king. Yeah. So the Romans were well, we're pretty interested in in looking after that territory. So the Judeans went, yeah, sure. Yeah. And then the Romans came in and took over Judea as well.
So I think even back then you had...
So their presence was certainly requested in Samaria.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think...
Not by the Samaritans, but by the Judeans, and then the Judeans got taken over too.
So I think even back then, right, you had these divisions within the Jewish world. You had Jewish elites who wanted to maintain their power structure and exploit the Jewish people as a whole to maintain their own power. You had this murderous cult, the Sicarii, who nobody knows if they actually existed or if they were just another word for the Zealots or whatever, who killed other Jews and opened the gates to and collaborated with fucking colonizers. And I feel that dynamic has always been there. And these guys even there was a modern version of the Sicarii who self-consciously named themselves after that example. And there's always been Jewish terrorism against Jews. I don't want to slip into the anti-Semitic trope of anti-Semitism is fundamentally primarily a Jewish phenomenon or anything. But
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think there's a lot of the
that's just an irony.
More extreme Zionists that don't help their cause by overinflating anti-Semitism and overusing the term.
Yeah, I compare it to like anti-white racism.
That does inflame more anti-Semitism.
That's right, and it's convenient for Zionism for there to be more anti-Semitism. And they use anti-Semitic tropes about meddling and shit when they talk about, say, George Soros, who goes against them. It's like they hate, and also the guy who founded Beta, Jabotinsky, Netanyahu's grandfather worked for him, actually, I think was his secretary.
Oh, Zed Jabotinsky.
Yeah. He wrote about the Yid, which is like an anti-Semitic slur, as opposed to the new Jew. And he talked about all these anti-Semitic tropes that he applied to the Yid, being like, weak and fucking, like not athletic and not assertive and sneaky and all this shit. And then contrasted that with the new Jew, which is what he was going to talk about. But it's like, so even at the very beginning, this ultra-nationalist Zionist type of thing, even within the Jewish population, had this anti-Semitic fucking flavour to it. So it's like, I mean,
it always has.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. So I think like the moral of the story is like, don't be anti-Semitic, because that's dumb. And
it's funny because like, this has been, I think you can see examples of this all throughout the Zionist movement. Like you look at because when it came to like the creation of the state of Israel, right? There were three big sort of like Jewish militias. You had the Irgun, you had Haganah, and you had the Lehi.
Yeah.
And the Lehi were literally going around shooting up fucking Jewish towns and kibbutzes, and blaming that shit on Arabs,
just stirring it up.
So they could stir up shit.
This always happened.
Yeah, and they did the fuck out of that. Now, as far as I'm aware, Haganah never did that.
Yeah.
Irgun, there's some questionable incidents there. But Lehi, it was a common tactic of theirs. They would go around and shoot up Jewish towns and Jewish villages and Jewish outposts and settlements.
Yeah.
And then they would go, oh look, the Arabs, Arabs are coming for you.
It's always like that.
You guys.
So that's it for this episode of the Spectrum podcast. We covered sort of everything that I wanted to cover for today. That last discussion of violence by Lehi and paramilitary Jewish forces against Jewish people in Palestine and Israel, and the mandate, it's not to trivialize anti-Jewish violence or to justify anti-Semitism. It's merely to point out that along with the anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitic violence committed by Gentiles, it's also often committed by Zionists, whether those Zionists are Jewish themselves or not. Now, Zionism itself is a fundamentally anti-Semitic movement because it seeks to subjugate, control, and endanger the Jewish people, including the indigenous Hebrew Muslim people we now refer to as the Palestinians. It's a complex issue, and I hope that we dealt with it with a certain degree of sensitivity. So please take it in the context that it's intended. Thanks a lot for listening, and please like and subscribe and opt in for notifications and share with your friends and comment and let us know what you think. I really appreciate it.